Chapter 3. The Fall of Creation. Heaven was not ignorant of the schemes of Lucifer. Jael was well aware of the coming attack directed toward his son Adam. It was for this reason that he had given Adam the command concerning the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Not only was Jael aware, he was also cognizant of the outcome. This scheme of Lucifer's would soon prove to his detriment, providing Jael ample justification to condemning him to eternal imprisonment. Jael had given both to his angelic creation and his image creation the freedom of choice. He had not created them robots, but free moral agents. Like Lucifer, Adam's destiny was a matter of decision. No one had coerced Lucifer to rebel. It was solely his choice. Choice, the word that would soon come to mean eternal delight or eternal damnation to all mankind. It was this 6-letter word that would soon cost Lucifer his freedom. The 4 rivers whose origin was from paradise each ran their own course, watering the garden planted by God himself. Rainbow and golden trout, iridescent bluegill and silvery minnows, propelled themselves amongst the tall rushes that swayed back and forth in a gentle breeze. Dragonflies darted about, skimming the surface of still water in their nervous style. The fragrances of countless varieties of flowers intermingled with the heavenly aroma of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Adam and his wife wandered past it, without even stopping to consider it. This tree was the sole property of Jael. He had given them every tree of the garden for food. It was not necessary for them to have this one also. Butterflies fluttered across the open meadow, which was a virtual sea of clover and multicolored morning glories. Bees buzzed about, lending the humming of their wings to the symphony of chirpings from gaily colored songbirds and the continuous din of cicadas. Nearby, on one of the lakes birthed by the excess of waters from the 4 rivers, swam alabaster white and indigo black swans. Mallards and geese intermingled in harmony upon the surface, tending their young. Stilted whooping cranes and flamingos waded amongst its water lilies. In the shallows a tree had fallen. It was alive with salamanders and newts. A painted turtle at its upper end dropped lazily into the water, just prior to Adam and Eve's arrival. Adam and his wife stood a little ways off from the fallen tree, enjoying the breathtaking panorama of the Garden of Eden. In the near distance was a great forest of pine trees, their pointed tops steepled toward heaven. They stood as tall dark green silhouettes against the aquamarine sky. Small rolling hills could be seen just to the left, jutting from the earth like camel humps. Along the shoreline were creatures of all sorts, wading and drinking. Near the bulrushes amid a sprinkling of partially submerged boulders peeked the face of a lone crocodile, eyes periscoped from just below the surface. Adam took his wife's hand and they continued their stroll about their home. They passed a family of lambeos sitting upon their haunches, with their smaller forelegs bracing against a pear tree. They picked its fruit. How beautiful they were with their amber bodies, viridian stripes, and bony head crests. The garden was host to some of the more massive beasts that Jael had created. There were hippopotamuses, elephants, and rhinoceroses. There were ceratopsians, stegos, a few species from the genus ornithopod and hadros. The more massive and colossal beasts such as the sauropods, and the larger ornithopods Jael caused to be outside of the garden. Jael had said to Adam that he should be fruitful, multiply, and populate the earth with humankind. Jael had also informed Adam to enlarge the garden condition of Eden to encompass the entire Pangaea. In time it would be so, but in the meanwhile Jael had prepared well for the earth. Adam and Eve would cultivate the land inside the garden, and the gigantic sauropods and the like would do so outside. As man would multiply and cover the face of the earth, these gigantic creatures would cease to exist. It was the will of Jael. He had placed within them a procreative regulator, triggered by territorial stress. This regulator would act upon the birth process of these huge beasts. The closer man in their proximity, the more the waning of their procreation. As man covered the face of the globe, these great beasts would eventually and peacefully die out. All animals died. Only man had the capacity of everlasting life. Its retention rested solely on his choice to obey the mandate of Jael. Jael had decreed, "Of every tree of this garden you may eat to your satisfaction, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you must not eat. For in the day that you eat, you will positively die." Adam and his wife knew the meaning of death. They had seen animals die. In one moment they were and in the next moment they were not, lifeless, only a shell remaining. How perplexing and shrouded in mystery was this thing called death. Eve stopped to cuddle a newborn fawn. She stooped, and the infant licked her face and hands. Adam stood alongside the buck and doe, feeding them a clutch of tender grass. All of the animals of the earth loved Adam and his wife, and they them. Eve stood, turned, and embraced her husband. She was happy, and together they shared the joy given them by God. They continued on their way, toward a path that would lead them to one of their favorite spots in their garden home. The first human pair walked naked, and without shame, being at peace with their Creator and their surroundings. They moved away from the lake and pursued one of its tributaries upstream. They walked beneath the fan-leafed ginkgos that grew in abundance. The sun hazed through their leaves like a great fuzzy orb. They approached a favorite haunt. Just ahead of this racing brook, which coursed over smooth granite rocks, was a large clear pool. Here the deer, springbuck, and zebra came to sip the refreshing water. Families of serpentine-trunked elephants stripped succulent leaves from overhanging trees. There were large boulders strewn along the perimeter of the pool, upholstered in yellowish-green lichen. Upon these were perched fin-backed dimetrids, and white egrets in proliferation. Waiting in the pool a lone stegos refreshed itself. Playful monkeys swung about overhead, and the birds of paradise nested in a conglomeration of moss-laden trees. There were parrots of every hue, great-beaked macaws, and crested cockatoo. Peacocks strutted their bright plumage. The songbirds performed their acrobatics as they winged from branch to branch. Adam and Eve frolicked, smiled, and laughed together. They praised Jael, for they knew he was worthy of praise. Jael had provided food in fantastic array. At arm's length there were bananas, peaches, dates, grapes, and figs. There were melons of every variety in the open fields. There were apples, plums, every sort of citrus fruit, and more, much more. A tiger panted lazily as he lay beneath the shade of a spreading schefflera, taking occasional glimpses at the activities going on about him. There was life everywhere, and all things operated within the perfect order of Jael. The angels of the Most High ministered to Adam and his wife. They appeared to them, and brought messages from their God. At times Jael would speak to Adam directly. Adam was perfect, holy, and unblemished before Jael. With their heads held erect, Adam and his wife worshipped and praised the Lord of spirits. They proclaimed, "You are the only wise and true Creator Jael, and we are your children. Find favor with us always, for we are truly in paradise." As they praised the name of Jael, the birds of heaven sang praises with Eve. The beasts of the field surrounded Adam and reclined, manifesting their subjection. Jael had created man in his own image, and he was master of his home earth. Of all the beasts that roamed the face of earth, the serpent proved to be the most subtle. It was an intriguing creation with its long slender body, and with small curled claws affixed to short scampering legs it was adept at climbing. It had on its back 2 folds of skin, that when stretched out enabled it to glide from tree to tree. Not only that, but like some of Jael's creations of the heavens, the serpent could talk. It was capable of mimicry. Jael had provided it 2 tiny but keenly sensitive ears that stood atop its triangular head like little horns. It was a shy and elusive creature, and would scurry and hide whenever anyone or anything would approach. Serpents fascinated Adam and Eve, but especially Eve. As the serpents learned more and more of the human language, they could be heard throughout the garden repeating all that they learned. This brought Eve tremendous joy. What clever little creatures, she mused. She would spend hours beneath the tree in which a serpent dwelt, her beaming face tilted upward, pleading in her most coaxing feminine voice, "Come down, little serpent, come down and show yourself. There is no need for you to hide. Come down that I may teach you many wonderful things to say." Lucifer sat restlessly on the throne he had prepared for himself atop the northern pole of the earth, just outside its atmosphere. From there he observed the activities of the human pair. He watched Adam and Eve as they carried out the decrees of Jael. He watched the comings and goings of his brethren, the angelic servants of Jael, as they ministered to Adam and Eve. Lucifer sat upon his dark throne, in his dominion of gloom, contemplating his revenge. Suddenly, added wickedness arose in the heart of the fallen cherub. He summoned one from amongst his ranks, an angel named Gadriel. Lucifer said to Gadriel, "I have come upon a plan, one to cause great grief and discomfort to Jael. I shall lead astray the man that is called Adam. I shall accomplish it through his wife Eve, by means of the serpent which she adores so much." Gadriel mused over the statement of his dark lord for a moment, then inquired of him in bewilderment, "How shall you accomplish this scheme, Lord Lucifer, and how is this serpent involved?" Lucifer became possessed of sinister joy, as he roared forth great peals of diabolical laughter. Lucifer boomed forth the name of his comrade Gadriel, saying, "Through the serpent I shall deceive Eve, and through her I shall cause the fall of that creature Adam. I shall become master of the earth and all therein. This is what we shall do, Gadriel. When the angels of Jael have departed, and returned to the third heaven to worship before his throne, I shall appear unto Eve and convince her to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. When I appear before her disguised as an angel of light, you, Gadriel, shall maneuver into place the elusive serpent. Come closer, Gadriel, and heed my command as to what you are to do." Tomorrow was the seventh day. Jael had decreed that since the demise of Lucifer, no holy angel in the vicinity of the earth could stay beyond 6 earth days. On the 6th day the holy angels on earth must return to the third heaven to worship before the throne of Jael. It had come such a time for Uriel and Serakel. They bade Adam a fond farewell until their return, then they lifted themselves on their magnificent wings and descended into heaven. Adam once again set himself to the work prescribed him by Jael. The Garden of Eden was being transformed by the creative whims of its occupants. Adam reflected over the words of Jael delivered to him by Uriel and Serakel, especially their repeated admonishments of total obedience to the Ancient of Days. As Adam carried out his work in the northeast segment of the garden, Eve was walking about in the southwest portion near the wall surrounding the garden. Here Eve was intrigued by a small flock of female animals, feeding them the vegetation of the earth from her hands. Lucifer and Gadriel arrived in the Garden of Eden. After making certain that Adam and Eve were apart, Lucifer commissioned Gadriel to seek out a serpent, and after possessing that serpent to meet him in the southwest segment of the garden by the wall where Eve was. Gadriel went forth and did as his dark lord commanded. He found a serpent and prior to entering him said, "Rise up, come that you may serve the purpose of Lucifer. You are the most cautious and wise of all beasts. You are to be the vessel of Lucifer, and through you shall he speak words to deceive the woman Eve, for you are a special creation of Jael and she will believe you." Gadriel entered the serpent and immediately caused it to go to the place foreordained by Lucifer. As Eve continued in her leisure, she became aware she was not alone. She heard singing like that of the angels of Jael. She stood still, attentive, attempting to locate the direction from which this sweet voice was coming. The animals that surrounded her bolted in all directions. What a strange way for them to act, she thought. The hymn of praise was now being sung at a higher decibel. She knew the direction from which it came. It was coming from near the wall about 30 feet away, behind a cluster of hedges and willow trees. As Eve approached, to her amazement she was met by a sight of intense beauty. She had seen the angels of Jael before, but none like this one. As she stepped forth into the clearing, Lucifer cooed, "Are you Eve?" Eve answered in a state of mesmerization, "Yes, I am Eve." Lucifer moved closer. He glided forth as if lifted by a gentle breeze, rested his great golden wings, and with his face like unto a man continued to question her, saying, "What are you doing here in paradise?" Eve responded, "The Lord God Jael has made us and set us over the garden that we may cultivate it, and eat of its produce, that we may multiply and become many and extend this garden over the entire earth, for he has given it as our home." Lucifer had Eve exactly where he wanted her. He had successfully engaged her. Now he would put into effect the trump of his malicious plan. He would question her even further, but not by his own mouth, but with the mouth of her favorite creature, the elusive serpent. Gadriel within the serpent had set it in the exact location predetermined by Lucifer. The serpent sat clutched to the wall in an upside-down position, peering out at Eve. With all the skill of a perfect ventriloquist, Lucifer threw his voice into the serpent, saying, "You are provided for well. But you do not eat of every tree that is in your garden? Eve spun in total amazement toward the direction from which this new voice emerged. She could not believe her eyes. There before her was a serpent, the evasive and vastly fascinating little creature she had so often pursued. Here was one before her, talking to her. Eve had taken her eyes away from Lucifer, and fixed them firmly upon the serpent. She naively answered, "We eat of all the trees of this garden save for one only, which is the tree that is located in the middle of the garden, which is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It is the tree that is exclusively the property of the Lord Jael. He has said we must not eat from it, nor even touch it, for in the day that we eat thereof we will positively die." The serpent spread its glide wings and sprang from the wall of paradise onto a low branch of a young sycamore. Eve was spellbound. She completely forgot about Lucifer, and cast her full attention on the serpent. The serpent purred back sage-like, "May God live, but on your account am I sadly grieved, therefore, I shall not have you ignorant. Come closer, listen to me, and I shall tell you of the value of the tree that you may eat of it." Eve recoiled in shock. "I cannot eat of the tree that is Jael's, for fear that he will be displeased with me." The serpent left its perch and presented itself on the ground, standing before Eve, gazing up at her with its tiny eyes, and said to her in a tone of unequivocal assurance, "Fear not, Eve, for as soon as you eat of the tree you shall be just like Jael himself, in that you shall know the difference between good and evil. The reason that Jael has commanded you not to eat of the tree is because he does not want you to be like himself. His motive is entirely selfish. Do not be afraid, follow me to the tree and I shall give you of its fruit." Eve opened to the suggestion of the serpent. It made sense. "Why shouldn't I be like God?" she thought. The serpent scampered ahead of Eve, leading her to the tree in the middle of the garden. Eve was now addicted to this idea of the serpent's. He had deceived her into placing her will above that of Jael's. Eve saw the serpent, but what she did not see was the evil and invisible force behind the serpent. She had totally dismissed the presence of Lucifer. Lucifer was ecstatic in his vileness. He had pulled the perfect switch. Eve was about to become his implement against Adam. So far his plan was working. Without warning, the serpent stopped dead in its tracks. It turned and said to Eve, "I have changed my mind. I will not give you to eat of the tree until you swear unto me an oath, that you will give the fruit also to your husband Adam." By this time the thought of being like Jael was embedded firmly in the heart of Eve. She stammered to the serpent, "What sort of oath shall I swear?" She grasped at all that she considered sacred, save the name of Jael, and formed them into an oath, saying to the serpent, "By the throne of the Master, and by the cherubim of the tree of life, I vow to give to my husband Adam also from the forbidden tree." With that the serpent continued to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It climbed into it, found a low-hanging branch, and bent it down so Eve could grab a cluster. Lucifer, through the serpent, poured upon the fruit the poison of his wickedness, which is lust, the root and beginning of every sin. Eve, intoxicated with her wantonness, plucked and ate the forbidden fruit. At the instant she ate of the fruit her eyes were opened. She was stripped of the innocence of her perfection, and knew she was naked. Eve wept bitterly, hurling accusation at the serpent, pleading, "Why have you done this evil thing to me, depriving me of the glory in which I was once clothed?" The serpent did not answer, but disappeared into the low-lying brush. With its work completed, Lucifer released the serpent. Eve was now frantic. She was naked. She must cover up. At the moment she had partaken of the forbidden fruit, the fruit and blossoms of the trees surrounding her fell rotted to the ground. From the leaves of a fig tree she fashioned a covering. Eve gathered the remainder of the cluster of fruit, remembering her oath, and set out to find her husband Adam. She began calling out to him, "Adam, Adam, where are you?" Upon finally hearing her voice, Adam answered, "Here I am." Eve continued saying, "Adam, stop whatever you are doing, and come to me that I might show you a great secret." When Adam arrived, she opened her mouth and the voice of Lucifer proceeded from her lips. Eve said, "Come closer to me, my lord Adam. Listen to me, and eat of this the fruit from the forbidden tree of Jael. For at the moment you eat of it you shall be just like Jael himself, knowing the difference between good and evil." Adam recoiled. "I fear to do such a thing, Eve, lest Jael be displeased with me. Eve placed the forbidden fruit in her husband's hand, coaxing, "Fear not." In the instant Adam ate of the forbidden fruit, his eyes too were opened. But something even more devastating occurred. Creation fell. The flowers and fruit of every variety of vegetation throughout the entire Pangea, save the 2 trees of Jael, drop-trotted to the ground. The living creatures of the earth were thrown into instant confusion. From the tiny ant to the gigantic sauropods, creation was in chaos. Sweet-throated songbirds began to screech. Elephants began to trumpet. Lions began to roar. The herds began to stampede. The earth began to creak under the strain of imperfection. Adam cried out in discovered pain, "O wicked woman, what have I done to you that you have deprived me of the glory of God?" Adam blamed his wife, but deep down inside he knew it was his fault that he was no longer in perfect standing with the Lord Jael. Adam, upon realizing his nakedness, understood the reasoning behind his wife's covering of leaves and hastily followed suit. He came to understand the meaning of both good and evil. True, they had become as Jael in this regard, but what they did not immediately understand was that from that moment they had begun to die. Adam and Eve ran to the remotest part of the garden in an attempt to hide themselves. They had never experienced this gnawing sensation that was guilt. They were ashamed, and they hid. It was in this sad state of decline that Adam came to know his wife, to propagate his newfound imperfection to his offspring. In a now imperfect world, in an unholy imperfect state, Eve became impregnated with the continuance of mankind in sin. The third heaven was in an uproar. The angelic servants of Jael bemoaned that which had occurred before their eyes. They had watched the entire scenario from the kingdom of the third heaven. Jael had not interfered. Lucifer had chosen of his own volition to sin against Jael, but now he had tricked the human pair with his supernatural power and intellect. Had the human pair withstood the test, and rebuked the fallen cherub, Jael would have had ample reason to punish Lucifer on the spot. But he had not failed. Lucifer had now successfully persuaded the first human pair against Jael's seat of authority. Lucifer had become a lying, deceiving murderer. Because of his deceptive tactics, Lucifer had caused the death of the first human pair. By Adam's own forfeiture was Lucifer now Lord and ruler of the earth. The angels of heaven were appalled, and screamed for Lucifer's instant annihilation. Michael stood before his Creator awaiting the command of war, but there came no such decree. Lucifer had won this battle, but all intelligent creation was clueless that Lucifer's scheme had activated the plan of Jael set from before the founding of the world. This plan included the coming of a great and final future war between the sons of light and the sons of darkness, a war that Lucifer could never win, to recompense him fully for his villainy. Jael thundered an assembly call of his heavenly host. They took their positions around his throne and he spoke, "You have witnessed the fall of man, and the fall of creation. You have seen the deception of the woman, by he who is the father of chaos. Lucifer has raised his hand against what is not his own, therefore he has raised his hand against me. He has challenged my crowning creation, man, and it is through them that I shall bring Lucifer to his knees. Adam has lost paradise, but I shall give his offspring the opportunity to regain it. Within the womb of Eve is already living the fruit of man. From mankind shall I also replenish to this my dominion, those that are fallen with Lucifer. I have not created the earth simply for nothing. Lucifer is already defeated, and has been since before the setting of the foundation of the world. This is but the beginning of the war between the called and the sons of darkness." Jael summoned Michael and said, "This is my decree. Proclaim to all of the angels of heaven that we are going to earth that I might pronounce judgment." Michael did as Jael commanded. The 4 cherubim of the wheels lifted the throne chariot of Jael from the sea of crystal. They slowly guided the craft from the main hall, through the great expanse of the main doors of the vestibule, and into the outer reaches of the third heaven, a trail of billions upon billions of shining sparkling angels at the rear. The throne chariot moved toward and through the Alpha portal. Jael entered into the finite world of the second heaven, he and his multitude of angels. Once outside, Jael gave his command, and with a movement of lightning the 4 cherubim of the wheels streaked the throne chariot to its destination. The throne chariot of Jael stopped just short of entering Earth's atmosphere, the first heaven. Jael's chariot hovered above the vast sea of water that was suspended around the earth. At his command a multitude of the angelic beings of God passed through into the first heaven, blasting trumpets, singing hymns, and praises, announcing the coming of the Creator of the universe. The Lord Jael caused his chariot to set down in his garden, over the tree of life, and when he did every form of vegetation on the earth burst forth into flower. Jael called out to Adam saying, "Adam, where are you? Can the house be hidden from the very presence of its builder?" Adam sheepishly answered, "I hear your voice, my father, and it is not that I do not wish to come before you, but I am afraid because I am naked." Jael spoke again to his crowning creation saying, "Who has told you that you are naked? Have you eaten of the tree of which I commanded you not to eat?" Adam attempted to shift the weight of his guilt to his wife, and to Jael himself saying, "The woman that you gave me, Lord Jael, she gave me of the fruit and of it I ate." Eve was not to be outdone, and she passed the guilt to the serpent saying, "Lord Jael, the serpent deceived me, and I ate of the tree." Jael turned his attention to the very serpent chosen of Lucifer, and pronounced upon it a judgment that would also impact every serpent throughout creation. Jael decreed, "Because you are the instrument of Lucifer, you are cursed above all cattle, and above every beast of the field. Upon your belly you will crawl, and dust shall you eat all the days of your life." Jael stripped it of its legs, wings, ears, and power of speech. Jael split the serpent's tongue. There was no mercy in this decree of the Lord of hosts. At this point everything on earth was silent. Nothing dared to make a sound as the God of the universe pronounced judgment. Adam and his wife stood before their Lord, heads dropped low, tears streaming down their cheeks. As Jael continued to rumble forth his divine displeasure, Eve sobbed uncontrollably. She sought the closeness of her husband for security, as they wondered of their outcome in complete terror. Before their eyes the physical form of the serpent had been radically altered. It was horrid. What was once a proud and special creation of Jael was now nothing more than an oversized worm, writhing and twisting on the ground before them. Jael paused for a moment, Adam and Eve cringing and locked in fear at this sliver of silence. Without warning, the Creator of all things raised his mighty hand and brought it crashing down on the arm of his sapphire blue throne, bellowing forth in summons the name Lucifer. Adam and his wife fell to the ground, trembling uncontrollably, bewildered, their faces smashed into the earth, their arms and elbows locked about their heads. There was silence, eerie silence. Adam peeked upwards from beneath the protective shielding of his hands. He gathered enough nerve to raise himself to a kneeling position. There above him, and all around him, were the angels of Jael. On either side of him were stationed 2 cherubs. The angels of Jael stood or hovered in their places, their faces fixed upon what was now an invisible throne of Jael. It was obvious to Adam that they could see what he could not. He could hear the voice of God, but he could no longer see his blinding presence. What was to occur next was not for the eyes of the first human pair. It was meant only for the invisible realm. Jael had summoned someone that Adam and Eve did not directly know, Lucifer and all his following, to pronounce judgment. The Lord Jael lifted his head at the sight coming toward him. Still the same Lucifer, he thought as he remembered a similar meeting in the 3rd heaven. How proud and defiant this cherub named Lucifer. Lucifer kept his distance, for Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel were stationed at the extremities of the throne platform. Lucifer and his host hovered before Jael. Jael peered forth at his fallen cherub and said in a voice exuding doom, "Come a little ways forward, thou wicked serpent." In the invisible realm Lucifer proceeded closer to the throne. In the visible realm Adam watched as the serpent snaked closer to the location of the now invisible throne chariot. Adam was amazed. As he pulled his wife to her knees he whispered, "Eve, witness this event, for the Lord Jael is not finished with the judgment of the serpent." Jael raised his mighty voice to the pitch of thunderclaps, his finger pointing toward Lucifer in a gesture of condemnation. "I shall put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise you in the head, and you shall bruise him in his heel." In the invisible Lucifer and his host, and all the angelic beings of Jael were puzzled as to this statement by Jael. In the visible, Adam and his wife shared the same bewilderment. What woman? What seed? What enmity? What bruising? Lucifer hovered before the Lord of hosts, agonizing over the meaning of this mystery spoken by God, and then it began to happen. The throne of Jael took on a fiery pulsating glow as had not been seen by the angels since Jael created the portals of the third heaven and the finite world. The shield wings of the 24 and 16-winged cherubim instinctively shot into position, as well as those of the seraphim. The Nephilim backed further away from the presence of the Most High. The fallen angels cowered in increased fear, but Lucifer stood his ground. Lucifer had a front row seat to the answer of a mystery he had wondered about when he was yet in his position of glory in the third heaven. The mystery of the 3 pitches of thunder was about to be revealed. The cherubim and seraphim peeked from behind their shield wings. The Nephilim looked on from their place of safety. The fallen angels and their leader Lucifer stared in statue-like awe at the spectacle transpiring before their eyes. Jael was splitting apart, dividing, no trividing. Jael was in actuality 3. All present in that spiritual realm witnessed the mystery of mysteries. They began to understand what Jael meant when he had said, "Let us make man in our own image." Jael was 3 in 1, and 1 in 3. The angels of the Most High burst forth in song and praise. They blasted their trumpets and praised the mystery that was Jael. In the visible realm Adam and Eve, once again upon their feet, stood motionless, wondering at such a commotion. Invisible before that assembly stood God the Father Jael, his face glowing the white-hot color of heated iron, his face ineffable, marvelous and terrible to look upon, emitting sparks and rays that far surpass even the brightest star. To Jael's right stood another being, one who was in appearance like a son of man whose face was full of graciousness. This one was in appearance as adorned in the purest of white, and his countenance shone as the brightness of the sun. To Jael's left stood yet another being whose definition was formless, but who radiated untold power and might, a spirit being, an intelligent entity of personality and character, a formless force. Lucifer recoiled in trepidation. His followers disbanded in alarm as the 3 separate entities reunited into their oneness, and the voice of Jael commanded, "Serpent, be gone. No longer shall your name be called Lucifer, but Satan, the devil, for you are a liar, the father of the lie, a murderer, and a manslayer. Satan, be gone." In the visible Adam and his wife watched as the serpent slithered away, puzzled with the names by which Jael had addressed it. At that moment the Lord Jael reappeared before Adam and his wife. The instantaneous transfusion of his brightness to the eyes of the first human pair sent them crashing to the dust on their knees, their faces encased once again in the protection of their hands. Jael was not compassionate, for his edict had been disobeyed. He fired forth his judgment upon Eve and decreed, "Eve, because you have transgressed the mandate set forth from my mouth, I will greatly multiply your sorrow in your conception, and in sorrow and pain shall you bring forth your children. Your longing shall always be after your husband, and he shall rule over you." Then Jael turned his attention to his marvel of marvels, the man Adam, his image, and said, "Adam, because you did listen to the voice of your wife and have eaten of the tree of which I commanded you not to eat, cursed is the ground because of you. In sorrow shall you eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles shall the earth bring forth for you, and you shall eat the herbs of the field. By the sweat of your labor shall you eat bread till you return to the ground from whence I made you, for out of dust were you taken, and to dust you shall return." After the pronouncement of judgment upon the first human pair, the Lord Jael made coats of skin to cover their nakedness. The Lord Jael spoke within himself, saying, "Behold, the man has become as one of us, knowing good and evil. Let us cast him forth out of the garden, lest he put his hand forward and partake of the tree of life and live forever." Then Jael spoke and commanded a contingent of angels to cast Adam and his wife from the Garden of Eden. As they were being driven from the garden, Adam and his wife wailed aloud in dire lamentation. Adam begged the angels not to cast him from his home without allowing him to first make entreaty to Jael for mercy. The angels, moved with pity, ceased to drive Adam out. Adam came forth and threw himself before Jael, begging and pleading for the pardoning of his sin. Then Jael directed his attention to his angels and said, Why have you ceased from driving this wicked man from paradise? Why are you not casting him out? Is it I who have done wrong? Or is my judgment judged badly?" Then the angels of Jael bowed themselves low on the ground of paradise and worshipped Jael, saying, "You are just, O Lord, and your judgment is righteous." Jael turned his gaze to Adam sniveling before him and decreed, "I will not suffer you from this moment forward to be in paradise." Adam returned, saying, "Please grant me, O Lord, of the tree of life, that I may eat of it, before you have me cast out." Then Jael answered his corporeal son, explaining, "Adam, you shall not eat of the tree of life now, for I have commanded the cherubim with a flaming sword that turns every which way to guard it from you, that you may not partake. My son, you are now involved in a war in which your adversary has caused you to be. If when you are gone out from this paradise you should keep yourself from further evil as one about to die, when the resurrection shall come to be, I will raise you up from death and allow you to partake of the tree." Jael once again ordered the ousting of Adam and his wife, but Adam continued his weeping and protest. The angel closest to Adam sympathetically burst forth in a question of impotence, asking, "What would you have us do, Adam? The Lord Jael has decreed." Adam, through his anguished tears, pleaded, saying, "I know that you must cast me from my home, but I pray you to allow me to take fragrant herbs from this place, that I may make an offering to Jael after my expulsion." The angel looked toward the seat of God with pity in his eyes, because the angels of Jael love the human pair. The angel cried out in a loud voice, beseeching, saying, "Jael, eternal King, please command me, your servant, that there be given to Adam your son sweet incense of odor from paradise." And Jael bade Adam to take with him from paradise 4 kinds of fragrant herbs, they being crocus, nard, cinnamon, and calamus. After taking these were they cast from the garden. Adam and Eve stood outside of what was once their beautiful home. There was nothing on the outside to compare with that on the inside. The vegetation was in tumbled disarray. There were no well-kept paths, and outside of the garden lived animals of gigantic proportion. Because of their sin, creation had fallen. At the moment Adam ate of the fruit, all of the produce had fallen to the earth, rotted. The animal life of earth had begun to act strangely. There was now discord in the earth. It was now the domain of Lucifer, and the perfect balance of Jael ceased to operate at full capacity. Throughout the jungle could be heard cries of pain, as the larger animal life took advantage of the smaller. Because of the shortage of food and the imbalance of perfection, many of the beasts of the earth would deviate from their normal diet. Carrion eaters and some herbivores alike would become live flesh eaters. With no berries or seed-pocketed fruit to sustain them, the fowl of the air began to prey on insects. The character of sea life was changed, that it began to devour one another. It would not wax better as time progressed, but worse. Jael knew that Adam and his wife would and could survive outside the garden. He knew that they would multiply, fill, and replenish the earth. He knew that some would serve him as their master, while others would follow the path of mutinous Lucifer. He knew everything, and from those he knew would serve him would be chosen the called, those whom he would use throughout this crack in infinity to perpetuate his plan, the plan that would eternally right the wrong. Adam and his wife stood there as if rooted in that spot, just outside of the entrance of paradise. There was no way for them to return, for stationed at the entrance were 2 cherubim, and a flaming sword spun around the garden at indescribable speed, causing a field of energy that would mean certain death to anyone attempting to penetrate. As they stood there in this foreign world, they heard the angels of Jael blast their trumpets, and with a swiftness that is unperceivable to the human eye, Jael departed his planet Earth. Save for the stayed mute cherubim at the gate of paradise, Adam and Eve were now completely alone.